Hello, this is Math with Beth, and we are going to look at how to find x and y intercepts for a few different equations, and this is without the graph. So if you are in Algebra 1 and just want to know how to find it for a line, I'll probably do another video, but number 1 will help you. But number 2 and number 3 are a little more complicated, so this is more for Algebra 2 or pre-calculus, okay? So to find an x-intercept, the main idea is to plug in 0 for the y value and then solve, because you're only ever going to have an x-intercept if the y value is 0. And then to find a y-intercept, you're going to do the opposite. So you're going to plug in 0 for the x value. So these are kind of just the basic rules on how to find an x and y-intercept. But it's not always as easy as that. So that's why I'm going to show you one from a line. So this is a linear equation, a quadratic, which means like a parabola, or an absolute value equation, which is the V graph. Okay, so again, this is without a graph. How would we find these things? So number 1 is pretty straightforward. So to find my x-intercept, I'm going to go and keep my x, but put 0 in for the y, and then solve. So 2x minus, this is really 0, gives me this. Divide by 2 on both sides, and my x-intercept is 6. Or if you want to think of it as a point, it would be the point 6 comma 0. For the y-intercept, I go back to that same equation, but this time I keep the y value there, or the variable, and plug in 0 for the x value. So same thing now I solve. 2 times 0 is 0, but don't miss that that negative should still be in front. So now I'm going to need to divide by -3, and y equals -4. But remember, that really means my y-intercept would be the point 0, -4. So some people understand how to find this 6 and this -4, but then they put them together as one point. They're not one point. These are two totally separate points. Here's my x-intercept. Here's my y-intercept. Number 2, same idea, but we know this is a parabola. So we might end up with 2 x-intercepts. So I'm going to first start with the y-intercept, just because it's usually a little easier. So I'm going to go in here and plug in 0 for the x value. Make sure you use order of operations. So I'm doing my parenthesis first. That just gives me -3. Then I'm going to do my exponent, which gives me +9, because -3 times -3. And then I'm going to multiply, and finally I can subtract. So I'm going to get a -182. So my y-intercept is 0, -182. Now for the x. Plug 0 in for y, and then the solving is just a little bit trickier. So how would I solve this? I need to move everything but the x to the other side. How do I do that? First, get rid of anything out here being added or subtracted. So I'm going to add 200 to both sides. But now we're here. Now I need to get rid of that 2 that's on the outside. So I divide both sides by 2 to get 100 equaling all of this. Now I'm ready to square root, but remember, if you're square rooting both sides of the problem, you're really going to get 2 answers, a positive and a negative. So since the square root of 100 is 10, I really get plus n minus 10. And then one more step to add that 3, but be careful when you add it over here, because there's 2 different numbers there, really. So +10 plus 3 is 13. -10 plus 3 is -7. So I have 2 x-intercepts. So if I want to write those as points, it would be 13, 0 and -7, 0. Last one, let's just see how we would handle this with an absolute value problem. So I'm going to again do my y-intercept first. It's usually a little easier. plug 0 in there and just make sure I do order of operations. So I get a -3 inside the absolute value. But when I do the absolute value, it becomes +3. And then 3 minus 5 is -2. So 0, comma, -2, just like I said, but I didn't write. Okay, so that is a -2. So lastly, we are going to do the x-intercepts, which means plug in 0 for the y value and solve. So I need to move this -5, so I need to add 5 to both sides, but then that leaves me with an absolute value problem, which if you don't know how to solve, you can look up my value on solving absolute value equations. When you solve an absolute value equation, you end up having to set up two separate equations. So one would be x minus 3 equals 5, and the other equation would be x minus 3 equals -5. So I add 3, and I add 3, and I get two x-intercepts again. So if I wanted to write them out, it would be 8, 0, and -2, 0. So make sure your x and y intercepts are always written out at separate points, and they should always have a 0 for the opposite variable. So x-intercepts should always have 0 for the y value, and y-intercepts should always have 0 for the x value. Let me know if you need more of that or more of a certain type of problem for finding x and y intercepts. And I will see you next time. Thank you.